Well, I appreciated your comments, Tagore. This is a very good overview. Um, there's a lot of material there. You certainly explained a lot of things too, just going through this overall view. Um, there's some trivial things I was thinking. Let's see. In Revelation 7, when it talks about the earth and the sea and the trees, and it just occurred to me, well, wouldn't the trees be part of the earth when it's blowing on it? So what would be the distinction there with the trees represent? I mean, trees often represent people in scripture. Um, so is that what trees refer to there? You've got the earth and the sea and the people. And you're muted, Tagore.
That's right. Sorry. When you don't apply semion, you would get those questions. It's normal. It's natural. Trees should be included in the earth, and sea also should be included in earth. But earth, sea, and trees, they refer to different things when you apply semion.
So trees would be people, spiritual beings. Well, it wouldn't be
Yeah, not
spiritual,
spiritual
but
beings.
yeah, because
Trees,
right.
like if you go to Psalm 1, you are like a tree planted by riverside. The trees are normally Christians. It's a basic illusion. And and you have green trees and dry trees. Green have life in them. Other Christians could be losing their greenness. They're dead trees. And you have trees that are bearing fruit in every season, and the trees that are not bearing fruit. So there are trees that are bearing good fruit, there are trees that are bearing bad fruit. If you take just trees, it keeps expanding. Eventually, it generally refers to people, but in this context, uh, I believe it is talking about Christians, good, bad, and ugly, all categories of Christians. But if you take C, it has a different illusion of group of people. And Earth is also another group of people. Is there overlap? Perhaps. But when you apply this symbology, this semion, there seem to be different people, there's a lesser overlap. Uh, so we would do deep diving. I have, I don't have time to do all the researches myself. So I heavily borrow with people who have done 2 to 3 decades of work in this area of 144,000. And this happens to be a lady. Her name is Sue Patterson. She did incredible research. So I borrow much of her work as well as my own research and others. Uh, so I'm planning to bring all the wealth and all the juice and cream of other people's work to your benefit. And again, don't blindly believe anybody. Don't blindly take the information. Uh, Discern them. Try to study in the light of the verses and scriptures and question them. Question a particular interpretation. Even if I am doing interpretation, the trees are these, you must question me or question at least within your heart and mind. Is it really? So that I am expecting everybody. Just don't blindly ever take from anybody, any teacher, including me. So we will do that since Rita asked for this topic. Unfortunately, she could not come today, but hopefully people would come back next presentation. And I'm expecting at least a dozen messages, if not more, in this series because I want to explore every phrase. And once we explore all the phrases, all the 62 points, then we are more familiar with 144,000 and also uh, innumerable great multitude. Once we are familiar, right now I don't think we are familiar. If you are familiar, let me know. We can jump to the other presentations. Once we finish all 62, then I will take up higher level concepts. The higher level concepts are just blow away your mind and my mind. We will start with Jeremiah 5. There are a lot many places God talks about this. Uh, the Christians overall, good, bad, and ugly, how he deals. That's all about 144,000 are those who are making into first resurrection. They are first fruits. The great innumerable multitude are also first fruits. So we are talking about those who make it into first resurrection and first fruits, and we are also learning who would not make it into first resurrection. So this is very critical. This is actually salvational, even though we are putting this under prophecy insights. I believe this has to be on Fridays because it is salvational. Am I making sense? Or
Yes, yes. There's just a lot there. You've covered a lot of material.
if it if it took 2 to 3 decades for people to fully vet these verses, sure enough, there is sufficient information packed and compressed in these just 2 chapters.
So how long have you been studying just the Revelation and these points you brought out there?
Not much. Revelation, I'm a late joiner in studying Revelation, maybe 10 to 12 years.
Hmm.
My focus was always on Gospels. More on Gospels than epistles of Paul and John and Peter. So those like Romans and Hebrews, those were my 2 to 3 decades work. Then little bit of Old Testament. So 10 to 12 years, I find myself to be a novice compared to these giants. And,
Well, I feel
and
like I'm just beginning to start to scratch the surface here.
it's all relative, right? Everybody has to go through, like, if you're scratching surface now, these people have done the same thing 30 years ago. It's a relative. Everybody has to go through that. But glad that we are doing something worthy, something more honorable in the sight of God, more pleasing to Him, right? I believe that. I mean, we shouldn't negatively compare with other people who have studied more.
Right. God knows exactly where he wants us and gets us to that point. So, yes, I understand.
Yeah.
It just makes you humble when you realize how little you know. I mean, you realize that as you go through life, but then it's like, wow, you really see more of how much you really lack. And no, there's so much more out there.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, Tom.
So are you going to cover a little over five of those line items per session? Since he's talking about 12. Was that your theory, or is this going to be like you envision this as like one or two and then about 10 of them and of those line items of 62 line items? Do you have any feel for that?
I will pick up every presentation two or three at least, or four or five, depending on the the weight of each of the phrase. Some phrases want full blown one message, but other phrases I can combine two or three phrases into one message. So it depends on uh, how many points and how big they are. So I want to cover every point as much as I know. Then after me, another teacher would come into your contact, and that teacher would help you to even even take you to more depths. So every teacher has his role, and then God will move you to another teacher and then another teacher, while you also become teachers and help somebody else. This is all the handiwork of God.
I was just wondering
Yeah.
to prepare for the next session, how many of those should we be going
Okay.
into?
Let's,
That's all.
yeah, let me share my screen. So I will start from point one. Are you seeing my screen?
Yes, we are.
So, so I'll start with Mount Zion. Mount Zion on Lamb. I will go to Hebrews 12, and I want to explain how it is different from Sinai and Mount Zion with the Lamb. And this itself gives us lots of information that they are new covenant first fruits resurrected. So you can go through for the first, and then we can go. The second point is another message written on their foreheads. So I want to explore what is the forehead and how it is written, and I might combine sealed on their foreheads, and then voice from heaven, voice of many waters, thunders. I can combine three, four, five into one message, and harps and harping and new song, maybe another message. So at this point, I don't know how many messages would come out of all these things, but this would take good one full message. Where I want to go is I can even show you verse. So I will go Hebrews 12. Maybe I'll start with verse 18. Hebrews 12, verse 18. Here, Hebrews author compares with Sinai with Zion, Mount Zion. So first he talks about Sinai when that covenant was made. It was so terrifying. But here, this is a different mountain, new covenant from old covenant. So here he makes a big statement, verses 22 to 23. Without going to these two verses, you can't even explain the concept Zion, Mount Zion. You see, 144,000 are standing with the Lamb of God on Mount Zion. So what is Mount Zion? He tells us it is city of living God. It is heavenly Jerusalem. It is innumerable company of angels. And it is festive gathering of and church of the firstborn, the first resurrection, first fruits. Is the church, us, which are written in heaven, our names written in the book of Lamb. And to God, judge of all, we are standing before the throne of God, and the spirits of just men made perfect. And to Jesus, mediator of the new covenant, to the blood of sprinkling, and that speaketh better things than that of Abel. So these are the core verses, but there are other verses that talks about Zion. So that is the next message. Next Tuesday we will go through Zion.
Okay, thanks. Just curious.
Yeah, you can do more research on that Zion. What is Mount Zion? That's my plan, God willing. Or you can also tell me if you don't want to go with this much detail. If it is too much overwhelming, then we can cut short that much depth. We can go with the intermediate depth.
Yeah, sometimes you get into a situation where you can go to a certain level fairly easily, but the next level is a big jump and requires many more weeks to go through. So I'll let you make that call. It's your yeah, that's your responsibility.
Yeah, sometimes deep dives, you will be lost in the details. You lose big picture. I think partially that has happened to two witnesses. We were going too many places, too many deep dives. And when we come back to two witnesses, uh, I have to make more work to relate everything back to two witnesses. So I don't want that to happen for 144,000.
Yeah, that sounds good. A little roadmap might help.
Yeah, yeah. That this is the roadmap, definitely. All the 62 points would be the roadmap. So I will even mention the point number that we would be discussing for each of the presentation. So I would send an electronic copy in the next email of all the 62 points and also the diagram for abomination desolation from last presentation. So I will be sending two diagrams next Tuesday email from Don and Peggy.
Yeah, I appreciate the in-depth, when you go deep and explain things and so many cross scriptures that explain things. Um, I think that gives a lot of depth to it because you're connecting all those scriptures.
Yeah. Okay. Uh, if at any point, if something is overwhelming, we can skip those trails and after a few years we can come back. Like I want to take up Israel, spiritual Israel. That will take couple of messages if I can't compress in one message.
Well, I'm almost 72, so we can't go too many years.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have definite concrete plan. Like uh, people would cover 144,000 in one message, like 45 minutes. You're done. I don't want to do that. Like that's not really helpful to fully explore the subject with that granularity. Once we explore all the 62 points, then we can decide on going for higher level, more deep dives of 144,000. Where else you have the scripts that are eluded to 144,000? Like Jeremiah 5, she goes to a great deal, like this Sue Patterson, this lady. Prophet Jeremiah was asked to uh, grow his beard. And then God tells him, your beard is now the Jerusalem, that is church. Now shave off your beard and then take this hair, then divide it into three parts. And before dividing it into three parts, take a small handful of it and put it in your skirt and bind it inside, protect it. And then with the three parts you have, you do with each part what I am telling you to do. So she explores like the thing, the small little hair that he has put within his skirt, within his cloth. She connects it to 144,000. And then the remaining hair, three parts, one of the parts is the great multitude, innumerable. The other two parts, she explores what happens to them. God asks him to burn the other two parts of the hair. I don't know if are you familiar with Jeremiah 5?
Not.
She
I
goes,
will be.
yeah, she goes all through, like she comes back to Revelation, goes back to Jeremiah, then comes back to Ezekiel, and Ezekiel to Joel. She, I don't know how much time she spends, how many years she must have done research to come. She is one person, one resource for me. There are other resources also done similar work on this subject. So I will be pulling all that information and Tom, you can use your AI on logos and
All right.
supplement what we are discussing to complete it.
Yeah, I'd certainly try.
Is it interesting? Like, I hope it is. The subject is interesting.
Yes, there's so much in it,
Yeah.
and it represents those that are called and chosen, and you want to be in that group. So it's important we understand it. I can see why she worked on it hard.
She goes with a virgin. She defines. She has interesting. She has like lots of humor also. Like if you listen to a rabbinic Jewish rabbi, He says they are male virgins, male Jewish virgins, who are not defiled with physical woman. She says what the Jews would say in her thing. Really? She says. Let's investigate this one. And she goes through different verses that talk about virgin and virginity. She has a humorous way of defeating her adversaries, the false
Sounds
doctor.
like, yeah, it's kind of lighthearted though.
Yeah, lighthearted. I mean, she's not bent on attacking everybody.
Right.
But she says like the conclusions people make are so funny when you are superficial and on surface. They do private interpretation. They don't let scriptures interpret for you. Who are the virgins? Who are not defiled with woman? Scriptures, there are lots of scriptures you have to comb through. Instead of that, you just make a random conclusion.
Is it possible that when they say not defiled by women, is that they've um, gone outside of some people that have been faithful to one woman and not done anything with the others?
No, it's
No?
not in the flesh layer, the spirit layer. It's a false church. It's a Babylon church. That's how adultery is defined. Even in the Old Testament, God talks about adultery when Israel went whoring after other gods. He said, like, you are a harlot. Your sister Judah is also silly. She is also going after your harlotry. Now I am calling her Babylon. Now she has become like Sodom and Gomorrah, all in the context of false gods and and lies. False gods are lies, like compromise of truth. So that we will establish. It's not talking about physical virginity. Physical adultery is wrong, but it is a shadow that helps us to understand spiritual adultery. Even when Jesus said, when you look after a woman to lust after her, you have already committed adultery with her in your heart. I no longer believe he is talking about physical woman. He's talking about Babylonian woman with all the attractions. Yes, Stan.
Yeah, your last comments made me think of something. So when Israel came out of Egypt, and some of the Israelites said, "Oh, it would be better to be back in Egypt and eat the onions and the leeks and whatever rather than be out here." Were they committing spiritual adultery with Egypt? I'm done.
It's a way of going back to Egypt is more like a rebellion. I think I'm giving my 2 cents. Stan, it's more in the area of rebellion than adultery. When they embraced Baal, Shemash, groves, Ashtaroth, that's where God is calling them committing adultery, harlotry. Going after other gods is fundamentally Egypt. You can make a case. They want to go to Egypt rather than go forward to promised land. So it's a political harlotry. But there is spiritual harlotry also, which is going after other gods. I'm done. I think the difficulty is people do not define the words. If you don't define the words, then everything would be like in the air. Everybody can, people can hear differently what you're saying because their things are not defined. So that's why I want to define adultery, define Zion, define what is standing, define mountain. If you define everything, there is less room for private interpretation. You define with the verses in context. So your understanding would be solid, more nearer to how the scriptures are using these words and their literal meaning in Greek or Hebrew. We would be doing that also. There's a saying, Bible is its own dictionary.
That's true. It's important that everybody stays on the same page because they understand what definition you're using for those words.
In Old Testament, everything is literal. Thou shalt not commit adultery is physically committing adultery with another man's wife. That is literal. Now we are coming to spiritual realm. Flesh is kind of downgraded. In fact, Jesus said like one sweeping statement, the words that I speak are spirit and life. Flesh profits nothing. I'm not talking about flesh things. Everything I'm talking in the realm of spirit. And then apostles come and tell us we should all be knowing each other only in spirit, not in flesh. Even those of us who knew the Lord in flesh, going forward, thus, we no longer know him in flesh, but in spirit. So, see the thrust that new covenant brings us to think spiritual. When it talks about adultery, spiritual adultery. When it talks about murder, you're murdering people with second death through your lies and false doctrines. Everything has spiritual uh, push, spiritual counterparts to what was in literal Israel, literal sins. Any other things that you noticed interesting in 62 points? Any things you want to comment on 62 points? Yes, Stan.
I think sometimes people underestimate the importance. I forget which chapter it is. I don't have the chapters open before me, but one of the points of the 144,000, they follow the Lamb wheresoever he goes. Sometimes that takes courage, as you know, and sometimes a person will not be popular for following the Lamb wherever he goes. I'm done.
You're right. I fully agree with you. It's not popular even among Christians. Leave the world. Sometimes Christians are biggest uh, agencies that pull us back from doing that. Where I am, my disciples also be. So that's definitely difficult. If you take that as command, Stan, my disciples would be where I am. It's not like one of the 10 commandments. Thou shalt not steal. Okay, I won't steal. It won't be like that. These things. First, you have to understand what he is asking. That's why knowledge is not sufficient for new covenant. Knowledge is the first step. Then you have to understand is the second step. And third is to apply, that is wisdom. And then you need shortage of discernment and then discretion. You have the stack. I'm gonna give stack next time when we have Luke's Gospel of Luke presentation. All of them are essential steps. But if somebody says, my salvation doesn't depend on my knowledge, really? I think we are coming close to 10 p.m. We will wrap it up unless you have a question or comment. I'll stop recording also. Yes, Stan.
I think that people that say that my salvation doesn't depend upon knowledge, I think they mean the knowledge per se. I think what they're arguing against is you can't stand before Christ on Judgment Day and say, I've acquired all this knowledge, so you have to let me in. I think that's what they're saying. I don't think they are, and I could be wrong, I don't think they're taking a negative stand against acquiring any knowledge. I just think they're saying a person can't say, okay, I've learned a lot, so I think I've made it into the kingdom. I think that's what their position is. I'm done.
That would be great if that is their position. What somebody made a comment a couple of months ago is, my knowledge or lack of knowledge has nothing to do with my salvation, because I am saved by grace through faith. So knowledge has no role. So that's false statement. So I'm reacting to that. You need knowledge of salvation. That's
Yeah, because the statement that they made, I'm not saying they're talking once saved, always saved, but it's easy to take salvation by grace and step over the line and say once saved, always saved, which I know that you know is not true. I'm done.
Yep, correct. Okay, then I'm stopping recording. So we will